Hey everyone, my name is Payne, and the theme for this issue of Locomag is coffee and paste. If you couldn't already tell by the title of the video, today I'm going to be testing out 4 different coffee hacks and recipes from the infamous 5-Minute Crafts channel. Now, if you've ever seen a 5-Minute Crafts video, you've probably thought to yourself at least once, that doesn't seem like it should work. Or, why would someone take time out of their day to make that? Well, you'd be right in assuming that some of these hacks and recipes wouldn't work. And that's because a lot of people have thought the same thing, tested them out, and debunked them as fake. With that in mind, I'll be trying to recreate 4 of these coffee hacks and recipes from their video, 40 Delicious Coffee Hacks. Now, to be fair, none of these clips in this particular video seemed too far-fetched to be considered real, but I did notice a couple of them sounded kind of unappetizing, so I'll be verifying that shortly. I'm also picking a couple that sound legit, but checking to see if they're even worth making in the first place. So, without further ado, let's get started.
I decided to start off with the one I was most questionable about, which is where they decide to make coffee jelly out of gummy bears. I don't know about you, but I've never heard of fruit-flavored coffee, and I think there's a reason for that. They say to let it cool for an indefinite amount of time, and then they cut it into small squares that supposedly can just be scooped right out and put into what I'm assuming is milk. So I got a bag of Haribo gummy bears, threw them in a pan, and poured a cup of water in. I had to guess the measurements for this recipe because it didn't specify, which is typical for most of this channel's recipes. I guessed they used about a quarter cup of instant coffee, so I put that in, let it sit before stirring like they did, and waited for it to simmer. My cookie sheet was a bit larger than theirs, so my jelly was going to be thinner in comparison. I let it cool in the fridge for about an hour and a half, and when I took it out, it felt like a large flat gummy bear. It didn't smell that great, to be honest, because the fruit actually overpowered the smell of the coffee. I sliced it up in small pieces like the video showed, and then it was time to test to see if the squares came out of the pan neatly. Unfortunately, it came out more like a ribbon that folded onto itself because it was just too soft. Maybe I used the wrong proportions of ingredients, but who knows. Next is similar to the last, except this one makes individual unnamed coffee treats. They boiled some coffee with gelatin and put it into a silicone mold. They then repeat this process by replacing the coffee with condensed milk. Each time they pour those mixtures into the mold, they freeze it to make it set faster. By the sound of this recipe, it doesn't seem too bad, and I think it might actually be enjoyable. Surprisingly enough, this recipe was a little tricky, mostly because I had never used gelatin before. I had to restart twice because the first 2 times the gelatin separated from the coffee and burned. I ended up using half of what the recipe said to use because I was running out of gelatin. In their video, they only mixed it up once after putting the gelatin in, but I noticed in my pan that it kept trying to settle at the bottom, so I had to keep stirring it so I didn't have to restart again. I also noticed that their mixture formed a rolling boil, while mine was only simmering at most. I didn't have a small silicone mold like they did, but I did have silicone muffin wrappers, so I poured my mixture into those. I had to use a few spoonfuls so it didn't set too thinly. Next, I prepared the condensed milk mixture and made sure to let it cool off of the burner while I waited 10 minutes to take the coffee mixture out of the freezer. The coffee jelly was set, so I started to pour the milk mixture on top like they did in their video. However, immediately upon pouring it into the molds, the milk mixture started to melt the coffee jelly. It wasn't a big issue since it wouldn't affect the taste, but even after letting the milk mixture cool down for a bit, I still didn't achieve the same look that 5-Minute Crafts did. The next coffee hack is a simple way to make coffee syrup. This is another recipe that doesn't include measurements, so I'm gonna have to wing it again for this one. No cooking is required, thankfully, and it honestly looks pretty good, so I have relatively high hopes for this hack. Again, I have to assume that they're using milk because I'm pretty sure that no one would drink that much cream. To me, it looked like they used a 3-to-4 ratio of coffee to sugar, so I used a cup of sugar and 3/4 of a cup of coffee, and another cup of water. Conveniently enough, I had an empty bottle to use that fit the syrup perfectly. This last hack is pretty unconventional as it offers a solution to getting rid of sleepiness. Instead of just drinking coffee like a normal person, 5 Minute Craft suggests mixing in Coca-Cola for an extra boost of caffeine. I have no doubt that it works, but the idea of having soda and coffee together just doesn't sit well with me. Obviously this was super simple to make, and I just eyeballed the amount of liquids to put in since they didn't even measure in their video. It's time to showcase the hacks before I taste test them. Starting off, we have the Gummy Bear Coffee Jelly. First thing I noticed is that it doesn't float like theirs did, but it doesn't look too different other than the fact that mine didn't come out in squares. Next up are the unnamed coffee gummies. While they don't look the same as 5 Minute Craft's version, I think they should be identical taste and texture wise. Next is the coffee syrup, and I honestly don't think I could have messed this up because it's so simple. I think I'll like it. But on the other hand, I'm not looking forward to trying the Coca-Cola coffee. I'm sure I didn't mess that one up either.
So, with all of that out of the way, now it's time for the real test. Does it taste good? First up, we have the lovely Gummy Bear Coffee Chunks. Bon appetit. Ugh. Gross. Yeah, don't melt gummy bears and coffee together. Why would you do that? Let's try one of these jelly condensed milk coffee things. Luckily it came out of the molds pretty well. Right here is the only coffee part left. I don't think it makes that big of a difference, to be honest, but it didn't stay separated like the video said. Let's try it. It's so slippery. This sucks. Taste-wise, it's not that bad, but that much gelatin compared to that much liquid just made it so... It's like chewing on an eraser, almost. Maybe don't make it jelly, just make it a drink. Now it's time to try the coffee syrup, and this one I'm kind of excited for because I don't see how this one could go wrong. Here's the pour shot. My milk to coffee syrup ratio is a lot different than the one in the video, but I think it looks great. Got my silicone straw out for this one. It's really sweet. I think it's too sweet. It's kind of bitter. I know coffee is bitter, but I think the amount of sugar in it just adds to that. That's so disappointing. I was really looking forward to it, and it's just so sweet. Maybe I got the measurements wrong because they didn't give me any, but I don't know. It's just a weird combination of how bitter and sweet it is. So, I don't like it. And now, the moment we've all been waiting for. Coca-Cola coffee, or Coca-fee, whatever you want to call it. Down the hatch it goes. Somehow it's not bad. It kind of just tastes like slightly watered down Coca-Cola. Somehow the coffee doesn't have that intense of a flavor in it. I mean, it's not great by any means. I wouldn't make this ever, but it's not terrible, which is sad compared to these things. If you ever feel like waking up, have some Coca-fee. Well, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised because 5 Minute Crafts likes to make everything that they put out to the public simple and easy to make, which, admittedly, it was, but that's the problem. This shouldn't be that easy to make. I feel like if they had more ingredients, they could be good, maybe. Less gelatin, less sugar. I don't know, why add gummy bears to coffee in the first place? I don't really know what 5 Minute Crafts was thinking with all of these, but I have to say, it does get my attention, and that is their goal. Doesn't necessarily mean that everything has to work. It doesn't mean that things have to taste good, which none of these really did. I think the moral of the story is don't follow 5 Minute Crafts. They're not going to give you a desired product. It might taste bad, it might taste decent, but not worth the effort of having something that's just decent. I think it's safe to say to not make any of this. Accept maybe the syrup, but do it better. Don't follow 5-minute crafts. Look up an actual recipe for coffee syrup. Despite how it looks, this is actually a really fun project to do, so I hope to do more like it in the future. Thank you so much for watching and tuning into this issue of Locomag. I'll see you next time. Bye!
If you saw the lighting change throughout the video, no you didn't.